Welcome back to the podcast series. Today we're discussing child protection in a South African context. Dr. Khan, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here today. We have different types of child abuse that we do see and is experienced, ranging from sexual abuse to physical abuse, neglect, which is one of our big and quite a difficult topic as well. And then we have emotional abuse and others. When you speak about abuse, it's an entire aspects and different components that make up. And I think the bigger picture that we need to see is the end part, which ends up prosecutors finding the perpetrators and getting all that. And that means that the beginning needs to be done correctly and as perfectly and as packaged as possible from the time when things get reported. And I think the reporting is also something that needs to be important, that there's no runaround for the family and to make it a more distressing thing. So there's multiple components. There's the medical component to it. There's the police component to it. There's the counseling component to it. And there's the court component to it. So there's multiple parts and trying to get those aspects to work together in the process. So also knowing that it's not just a process that's going to be reported tomorrow and you're going to have the end result in a week's time.
Right.
What we see when children they do report and they come to us for their physical, we can fill out the police documentation, that goes off to the FCS police, which is the forensic police unit. Then a case gets opened, then there's forensic social workers and all of that then it gets to court.
Right.
Then you need to have the perpetrator, if it is known, which a lot of the time is known, then the perpetrator gets taken into custody, a bail application, and then the court date might happen in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. And that's why the process can be a bit daunting. So there's no quick method. There's not something that's going to happen immediately, and it is a process, like you were saying.
Yeah. So with healthcare almost being the locomotive of the train, you guys have to collect the evidence that would in the end result in a successful conviction. And that can only happen if the procedures were followed to the letter of the law. So when a case like this presents, there's obviously a psychological element to this, and victims often need additional support aside from the clinical care. Talk us a bit through the type of cases that you have, ranging from not so serious to those that are serious and more complex, if I can call it that.
So I think it's important to understand that every case is serious. Because again, it is this multifaceted part of what we were saying. And I think the psychological component is the part that hits quite heavy. The physical parts are all usually things that it repairs with time and but the trauma of what happens always stays. Whether it is someone who was nearly sexually assaulted and got away before, I think the trauma of that still stays on, and the counseling part is quite important. And what we've also what we have seen and from experience is that generational abuse is a problem. And that is exactly where the process of counseling becomes so important, is we've seen that a child who's been abused by their grandfather or their uncle is now doing it to their little cousins or friends at creche. And it is at the level of being 6-7 years old, practicing what they've experienced. And I think that ongoing trauma is something. Yes, the medical part is so important so that the prosecution happens and that everything is sorted out on that end. But if you look at the components of the trauma and the mental part and the child's part, that is the part that becomes the crucial part within that years waiting for that prosecution. Because at the end of the day, we do want children to feel safe, to have a healthy mind, that this is not normal where someone touches your private parts, where that is part of sexual assault, just touching someone's private parts, rubbing up against them. That's what we do see. And we do see the more complicated cases where we need surgical intervention because of damage that has been done to the female or male genitalia. We can never know what affects a child more. It can equally affect them in a emotional and mental way. And that's why our counseling part is also such an important part of this. It's not just one component. There's multiple parts that makes up this holistic part of managing our children.
I really appreciate you speaking about holistic care, and I would imagine also multidisciplinary in consulting with those cases. Let's talk about creating that safe space for children. When a worst case scenario did happen, what is the safe spaces for children?
So again, just saying safe space, yesterday we had a little girl who came to us for a follow-up blood tests and all of those things as part. So she was sexually assaulted by her dad over the December holidays. And again, the perpetrators are usually known.
Yeah.
And she came into our offices yesterday and she was just a different child. She was happy, she was playful, she didn't want to leave the space. And we are hoping that it is that with a little bit of support and whatever, but she is in a place of safety and she was quite happy.
And she obviously knew it and felt it.
Yes, she did. That the area that we work in is also a safe space for a short period of time. That is. And obviously the safe space is generally away from where the perpetrator is, right, or the area or space that person is. So a lot of the time, yes, we do have kids that are admitted because when these incidents do occur, it's usually in their homes, and their homes are not seen as a safe space after that. So again, we do have to involve the social development and the social workers and all of that to find a safe space for them, whether it is a safety parent in that time, whether it is a safety home. So we do have, in view of people who's been affected by domestic violence, so they usually have women and children shelters that can be seen as but remember, that's not always the long-term plan.
That's
but
an interim
for that
solution.
Time, while we can get things sorted out and get the counseling and getting all of those things, those are places that we do look at. The first step in being seen are the Tutuzela centers, is open to the community. So whenever there is a child who has an adult, or whatever, that is the first point of call. But there's also other places, your clinics and stuff can also be if that's the closest thing, and they should know what. Sometimes we have to get the police involved if they don't need a place of safety, but a place of protection as well. Right. So then they get those protection homes and stuff for children as well. We do have the more complicated cases that do end up having to stay in the ward because they still need their medical management. Yeah. So that is the interim process. And once the medical management is done, sometimes it does take a few weeks for them to find a place of safety, whether it is another family member, whether it is a home, whether it is a facility. We do try to facilitate those things.
Yeah. And when we think about identifying these cases, parents and family members must be vigilant. What should people look out for?
So again, a lot of the time, our victims, our children, they are exposed to this not generally not once. It's usually something that's been going on for a while, especially sexual assault. Also, if you look at physical abuse and stuff, it's usually part of domestic violence where the mother feels like there's no way to go, and they continue staying in that situation. Again, when we see with sexual abuse is that the perpetrators are usually known and kids are usually threatened. So they usually do feel quite threatened to report these things. We see kids who's been abused from the age of 1 year old to the age of 15 years old, even older, but in the pediatric, any age up until the age of 13. So we do see that very vulnerable group is the non-verbal, so the under 3 years old where there has to be things that you need to be on the lookout. So when changing their nappy, are you seeing anything abnormal? I'm not saying go and do an examination, but there's usually blood maybe in the nappy, or an older child not wanting to sit, not wanting to, or what we see a lot is the mom saying, there's just something smelly when she goes to the toilet or when he goes to the toilet. So to be on the lookout for those small things, and also to believe your child. And I think that's one of the big things is that we have moms who or parents that are very for, but we also know that we've had kids where it's been going on, and when we sit down and they will say, we told our mommies 3 months ago, we told our mommies that this has been going on, that because who wants to believe that it's your father or your uncle or your brother doing something this to the child. So again, is to always listen to the children, to give them that benefit of the doubt, to be able to make sure that you as a parent or as the guardian of that child is the guardian, is that child's safe space. I think that is the most important thing, is to also look at your child's behaviors. We've also seen moms pick up that they're playing ogat games, oh, why is it? And also to be vigilant about what is viewed on social media and stuff as well, because that's also one of the big things that has come up, that is also a part of child protection, and being able to protect your child from that cyberspace. So also, if you look at those things, it's so important, it's vitally important that you know your child best, and you should be vigilant about small behavior changes, toilet changes, a child pooping themselves, because that's also one of the other things, is that they're scared to go to the bathroom, they're wetting themselves, all those small little things that can be little red flags.
And of course, that denying the reality when a child comes to talk to you, gaslighting them in itself also causes trauma.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And we've seen it quite a few times in the group that we've seen, is that it's usually, no, we told this one because we could confide in them to say, but they said, no, it's not that bad. It's just touching. It's not anything else. And to remember that sexual assault, it doesn't mean that there has to be penetration.
Right.
Like to say,
unwanted contact.
And it's unwanted contact.
Yeah.
It's your safe space. It's like, no, they were only touching your boobs. It's okay. That's not okay. It's also to remind our children about what are these safe spaces, who are allowed to take them to the toilet. We have seen things happen at nursery schools, at nannies' homes, and it is so important that we make sure that they have their safe space.
Right. So often with interpersonal violence, parents may enter into a kerfuffle, if I can call it that, and many a time children fall victim or are injured in the process. Let's step away from sexual assault and talk about the interpersonal violence and how children sometimes get harmed or get caught in the crossfire.
And again, not just in that crossfire of having the physical aspect of it, but also the emotional and mental aspect of it. And I would say that we've had kids having to come from far and wide being admitted because of traumatic brain injuries. So it is that the child was flung across the room and hit the wall. We've had children where they were the shield in between and have broken arms. We've had horrific incidents where the fridge was pulled and had fallen onto a child. And those are the things where the catastrophic things happen to the children. And yes, it is the fight between the parents, but not knowing what those repercussions are. And you end up again with what was never meant to be harm to the child. And I think with what we've also see is that the long-term effects of that. So we do see the younger children with the traumatic brain injuries. You've had a normal, beautiful child developing well, growing well, and thriving, and you now have a child with a traumatic brain injury that ends up being wheelchair bound, having to have a pig to feed because they're swallowing. And that's how dramatic we've seen it, as in the worst scenarios of that. We've had children who come in with multiple burn wounds on them because someone had wanted to throw the pot of water on the mom, and it ends up on the child with multiple burns. There are devastating effects of that. And again, it comes down to that whole generational abuse and working through that and getting that right.
And, it's so unfortunate that children will have a natural inclination to want to protect a parent.
Always. I think communication is such an important part of any relationship. I mean, I'm not here to give relationship advice. It's that we've also seen the psychological effects, us as doctors, even just working in the front line and being able, and you have a child swearing at you, the biggest swear words, and you're like, where did this child? And it's verbal abuse. And it's the abuse that you don't think, it's like, oh, you're doing this to me, I'm allowed to swear at you. Where you can hear that this is behavior, or where you can see that this is behavior that is practiced at home. So you're trying to help them, you're putting up a drip, or you're trying to examine them, and the biggest shouting, kicking, screaming, not the normal tantrum. We're talking about violent outbursts with swearing. And that is also another part of the psychological stresses that could be going on at home.
Response.
And sometimes with us sitting in the emergency center trying to sort out the pneumonia that you have or the runny tummy, we don't get to sitting down with the mom and saying, but what is happening at home? What is happening at home? You must. And if you look at our communities and the effects of gangsterism and the poor socioeconomic areas that children do come from, and I'm not blanketing it, we have beautiful children who come in, but there are the few that do come that are quite badly affected by that. If you look at child trafficking, and we think we don't see a lot about it. But what's come up in the news now, children going missing all the time, children going, and this is where you also do have gangsters owning these children, putting their mark on them so that they are theirs, and getting them out of that is also, and we see it where children are in gangs from the ages of 7, 8, 9 years old. And that's so. But if you look at the bigger picture, a lot of the children don't have that basic needs. The basic needs. It's the right to be loved, and that is so important. And it's the basis of child protection, and it's what we would love to give back, where the children is seen, where they are heard, and those are the basis of what child protection should be about, making that space safe for them. And if we should talk about preventative measures, I think the one thing is to always be vigilant about what is going on around your community. You never know who your neighbor is. And that's the one thing, is that you always have to have good relations, but know what's happening in your community. Know what school your child is going to. Know when your child is saying something to you that you need to listen to them, that you need to be there for them. We can always make a situation better if we want. What can we do for ourselves to make that better within a community, within making safe spaces within our communities for our children?
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan, for the lives you change and the lives you save, and for the love and the care that you give to the children that have fallen victim to an unfortunate situation. And thank you for your time and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of them, please subscribe, like, share, and send it into your networks so that other people may also benefit from the insights you have gained here today. Until next time, take care.